All right, this is taking a look at some more poetic devices. I'm Justin Rempel, and I'm going to guide you through them. This is part 2, and we're going to take a look at different devices that have to do with comparison. A lot of the writing that we do in poetry has to do with comparing one thing to something else. But there are lots of different techniques or ways of doing that. So let's take a look at a few of the most common ones. An allusion is just a fancy word for a reference. This is different than an illusion with an I, which is like something that looks like one thing, but actually isn't. This is an allusion with an A, and it just means that we're referencing something from someone else's art or from history, something that already exists. Let me give you an example. Robert Frost has this line of poetry that says, "So Eden sank to grief." Now, you're not going to really understand this line unless you get the reference. Eden is in the Bible, and it's a name for paradise. So this line is talking about how something perfect turns into sadness. Things that are great about allusion is that you get to show off your knowledge. And also references come with all these wonderful extra layers of meaning that make our poetry deeper and richer. Some downsides are that if your reader doesn't get your reference, if they don't know what you're talking about, they're going to be a little confused and lost. And sometimes references come with extra meanings that we don't actually want. So you have to be really careful when you're using them. Hyperbole. This is a fun one. Hyperbole is just a fancy name for exaggeration, a comparison that is really over the top. It's too much. Often we use hyperbole to be funny, but sometimes we use it to create a sense of wonder or to really give a strong impression to the reader. This example says, "He felt smaller than a bug." Well, our character doesn't actually feel that tiny. He knows he's bigger than a bug. But this comparison is helpful because it gives us an idea of how insignificant or maybe how scared he is. It's a really vivid comparison. Metaphor is one of the most common poetic devices. This is a comparison in which you directly call one thing something else. So, for example, my love is an ocean. Well, my love isn't actually an ocean. It's not made out of water. But you can understand the comparison because my love is like an ocean. It might have a lot of depth to it. It might be very stormy or turbulent or rocky at times. There are all sorts of different ways that this comparison might inspire imagination and really evoke a strong emotion and reaction from the reader. Sometimes metaphors go on for a really long time. We call those conceits, and it can take up the entire poem. Metonymy is when we take a word that's connected with something and we use it to stand in for the thing itself. So, for example, we have the saying, "The pen is mightier than the sword." And I can say the pen, and you can understand that I'm talking about the act of writing. Now, a pen is just part of writing, but it's something that's connected to writing so strongly that all I have to do is say pen, and you know that I'm talking about writing in general. Simile. Simile is kind of like metaphor, except it doesn't say that something is directly something else. It uses a comparison word like or as. Similes are usually pretty short, but they can go on for a long time. We call that an epic simile. For example, here's just a common simile. It says, "She was as tall as a pine tree and twice as prickly." Okay, so we've used the word as, which is a comparison word. She's like a pine tree. And there's two ways that she's like a pine tree. She's really tall and she's kind of pokey. Great example of simile. Symbolism. Symbolism is when one thing stands for something else, and it might not be directly or obviously connected except through ideas. So for example, if we want to talk about love, there's lots of symbols for love. We might use roses and hearts. Sometimes a symbol might have multiple meanings. Often things that we use for symbols include colors, things from nature, like plants or animals, or even gestures that we make. So red is a color, and red can stand for a few different things. Sometimes it means love, but sometimes we use red to talk about anger. Some animal symbols include dog, often stands for loyalty. Butterfly often stands for transformation. And owl often stands for wisdom. Be careful with symbols because they can differ from culture to culture. So for example, in Canada, we might give a thumbs up to mean yes or good job, but that's actually an insult if we're in Greece. So make sure that you know exactly what your symbol stands for and who you're talking to. Sometimes symbolism is just personal. The writer just makes something up. And that's okay, but they need to make sure they do a good job of communicating to the reader what their symbol is and what it stands for. A synecdoche. This is when a part of something stands for the whole thing. So if I want to talk about my car, I might say I have a nice set of wheels, and I just say wheels, but you know that I mean the whole car. Another good example is when you're talking about someone's house and you say their door is always open, you're using just part of the house, the door, but you're talking about the whole house.